Today is April 10th, 2018. I'm Jake Morphonios with Blackstone Intelligence. There are major military mobilizations going on with the navies and the air forces of France, the United States, United Kingdom, Israel, Saudi Arabia. They are all preparing strikes against Syria. And in response, we have Russia, Syria, Iran. They are mobilizing their forces. Now, I've been watching the live feeds of naval and flight activities over the region. Folks, we are staring down the barrel of a gun right now. This is the closest to World War III that we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is very important intelligence that I'm going to share with you. So please pay attention and share this video like crazy. All right, I've been in contact with a lot of my sources in Europe and some of my sources in the Middle East. Let me tell you what I've learned. First of all, Russia has made it very clear. Let's go back. Russia has made it very clear in a very firm statement of the United Nations, this happened yesterday, that they have sent in teams to Duma and they have found no evidence of the use of chemical weapons. They interviewed doctors at the hospital and claim that the doctors are denying having treated any victims who were suffering from exposure to some kind of chemical attack. So the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, this is Vasily Nebenzia, he lashed out at the Western coalition, accusing them of lying, of trying to blackmail Russia and Syria into compliance. Russia is claiming that the attack in Duma is a complete fabrication that's been staged to justify a preordained Western intervention. So Moscow has asked for a group called, this is a UN-backed organization. They're called the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Russia has called on them to hurry to Syria and inspect the area for themselves to do their scientific testing, chemical analysis, so that they can verify that in fact there is no evidence of a chemical attack. So this group, the OPCW, they have accepted the invitation and they are en route right now to Syria. So it is the hope of Russia that the investigation by this UN-backed group, the OPCW, will prevent a U.S.-led strike on Syria. So one of two things is going to happen here. Either we are going to see the West wait until after the OPCW gets in there and conducts its investigation, which can take some time, or the West is going to just have to strike Syria immediately before the OPCW gets on the ground and can begin this investigation. Folks, if President Trump or the allies, if they strike Syria before the OPCW can get in there and do an honest investigation and find out what really happened, it is my belief that this proves that Trump and the allies know that there were no chemical weapons attacks and that they're going to use warfare to prevent the OPCW from going in there and doing its job and reporting the truth to the public. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I do want to point your attention to an article that was published on March 12th of 2018 in the Jerusalem Post, in which the Syrian army reported having found a chemical weapons workshop in Ghouta. Remember, we've got Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. Just to the east, the kind of the northeast of Damascus, is a region called Ghouta. And eastern Ghouta is where the town of Duma is. This is the area that is controlled by Jaish al-Islam terrorists who are trying to take control of, they along with ISIS and everyone else, to take control of the whole country. Well, it is still very likely that if a chemical weapons attack did take place, it was carried out by Jaish al-Islam. And remember, we've got a month in advance, we've got the Jerusalem Post acknowledging that the Syrian army has found chemical weapons workshops in Ghouta. All right. And before that, I think earlier in March, maybe even further back than that, and maybe I'll make a separate video on this, Russian military came out saying that they found evidence that there were chemical weapons factories being producing weapons. Russia itself is on record having said well in advance that they anticipated that there was going to be a false flag attack in Syria to justify a Western intervention. And that is exactly how this has played out. They told us it was going to happen. Now, setting aside all of that, there is another possibility, and that is that a Syrian airstrike in this area trying to fight Jaish al-Islam, it's possible that they inadvertently struck one of these chemical weapons facilities because they keep them hidden. And maybe that dispersed some chemicals that killed people. But regardless of what happened, whether it was 1, a chemical weapon attack by Jaish al-Islam, 2, an accidental strike on a terrorist chemical weapons lab, or 3, there was no chemical attack that actually took place, regardless of which one of those it is, there is no moral justification for the United States and its allies to launch attacks on the Syrian government and its army. So I support this Russian call for a thorough investigation by the Independent Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. I mean, really, what's the problem with this? This reminds me back of the build-up to the war in Iraq. Remember that? USA wanted to go in. The international community was saying, let's verify that Saddam Hussein has some weapons of mass destruction. So we've got Hans Blix and the UN inspectors going in saying, we're not finding anything. And we've got Scott Ritter, the former Marine who oversaw the destruction after the Gulf War of Saddam Hussein's chemical weapons depots. He said there are none. But they said, no, let's go in. We'll find it after the fact. And it turns out there were no weapons of mass destruction. Well, I see that same thing happening now. There is a rush to war before there is any evidence. This is Iraq War 2.0, actually 3.0 if you count, or 4.0 if you count the Gulf War and also the Iran-Iraq War, which was the U.S. State Department and the CIA getting Saddam Hussein to fight Iran. Well, let me tell you what I'm seeing right now by way of political and military movements. On Sunday, Israel attacked the Syrian T4 air base in Homs. They fired missiles from 2 jets that were operating near a U.S. air base in Syria and from 2 Israeli submarines that were operating out in the Mediterranean right next to U.S. NATO naval vessels. Most of the missiles were intercepted by Syrian air defense systems, but those missiles that did hit their targets killed at least 14 people, including 7 Iranians. So it is clear from this that the United States military was providing support to Israel during this military operation. It's kind of like a wimpy guy standing behind the big tough guy, coming out taking some shots, and with the tough guy standing behind him. So what are you going to do? Attack the weakling like Israel while you've got the United States standing behind him? So in response, those senior Iranian officials who were visiting Syria, they have said that Israel's airstrike that targeted their people, quote, will not go unanswered. So we are going to have some kind of response from Iran. But it gets so much worse than this. On Monday, President Trump said that he personally has little doubt that the chemical weapons attack was carried out specifically by President Bashar al-Assad with the support of his allies, meaning Russia and Iran. So what the United States president is saying here is, despite having no investigation yet, he is confident that Russia, Iran, and Syria somehow conspired together to drop chemical weapons on the very civilians that they've been fighting for the last 4 years to liberate. If you haven't seen Tucker Carlson's monologue from yesterday about this, watch it. He's saying the exact same things, pointing out the stupidity of believing this complete, absolute propaganda. Well, Trump had strong words of accusation toward Russia, toward Putin specifically. It is clear that Trump knows, and this is from what Trump was saying, he knows, he is acknowledging that if he starts a fight with Syria, this is also going to include fighting Russia and Iran. And he indicated that he's already got his military generals crafting a very strong response. So Donald Trump knows that this is going to be World War III. He knows it, and he's doing it anyway. He is foregoing diplomacy. He is foregoing investigation. He's just going to jump right into direct military fighting with an enemy coalition without the consent of Congress. Well, during the day yesterday, Trump's new national security advisor, this infamous neocon warhawk from the Bush administration, John Bolton, he spent the day meeting with people to prepare options for a military attack against Syria. So Bolton and Trump's new Secretary of State, who is the former director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. These guys are rabidly vicious in their rhetoric toward Iran, always have been. And as I told you guys months ago in videos, President Trump has been working to build a war cabinet to attack Syria and Iran. And a lot of you guys were saying, oh, that's not true. Trump is trying to keep us from going to war. Bull crap. Yesterday, President Trump also had multiple phone calls with France's President Emmanuel Macron. His spokesman told Europe One Radio that intelligence reports, quote, in theory confirms the use of chemical weapons. And he went on to say that it is France's position that if this is confirmed, France will participate in a military response. President Macron said that he would specifically target chemical weapons facilities in Syria, which is unusual since Syria destroyed their chemical weapons, and this has been verified by outside sources that have come in and verified it. On Monday night, last night, President Trump hosted a dinner for America's most senior defense and military leaders. And he's got them all in this great big photo op, trying to portray himself as this mighty commander of the world's most powerful military. This morning, the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she announced that Donald Trump has canceled his weekend plans to go to Peru and Colombia so that he can stay in Washington, D.C. to oversee a U.S. military action against Syria. And also, I saw that Secretary of Defense Mad Dog James Mattis, he has also canceled his travel schedule for this weekend. So they are planning something big to take place. Now, it has been reported also that Saudi Arabia is going to be participating in this transnational military action. One of my sources, Saddam Roli, said that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who also serves as the Saudi Arabian Minister of Defense, he spoke to the French president and told him this. He said, "Iva kuna bihajut ini al-qiyam bid arabet ma hil fayina fela nata ahar fi al-qiyam bid halakit," which translates roughly as, if it is necessary for our allies to strike the Syrian regime, we will not be late to the battle. So this is definitely shaping up to be a massive multinational war offensive. And I've spoken with my sources who have confirmed that U.S. Navy destroyer, the USS Donald Cook, which is DDG-75, is fast approaching the port of Tartus in Syria. That is the logistical base for the Russian Navy in the region. The Donald Cook is part of U.S. Sixth Fleet, and that is headquartered in Naples, Italy. So the Donald Cook, this destroyer, launched from the Larnaca port, which is in Cyprus, which is kind of an island not far away from Syria, from the coast of Lebanon, Israel, out there in the Mediterranean. The destroyer launched from there, headed straight towards Syria. The Donald Cook is armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles. They're also equipped with an Aegis missile defense system to try and knock down incoming missiles. Well, the destroyer is only 100 kilometers away from the Russian Navy port. And I can confirm that Russian warplanes have already been buzzing the Donald Cook. They have multiple times done these low-altitude flyovers. They've circled at least 4 times over the warship. Russian media reports that this is part of a psychological attack against the sailors on the vessel to try and encourage them to turn away from the Russian Navy port, to let them know we are not going to tolerate this. I think that it is very possible that if Tomahawk cruise missiles are fired at Syria from the Donald Cook, that Russia is going to try and sink that warship. Russia knows that what the United States is doing is very serious. And typically, if a U.S. warship needs to pass anywhere near this Russian naval base, the USA lets the Russians know. They notify them that they're going to be approaching, so that there's no accidental war that takes place. This time, though, there's been no notification. So Russia is expecting war from America. I can also report that sources have told me that the United States sent a Boeing P-8 Poseidon over the Russian naval base in Tartus and over Russia's air base in Latakia. Boeing's P-8 Poseidon is used for air patrol, it's used for anti-submarine operations, it's used for anti-surface warfare. The P-8 is reported to have been doing some very close-up snooping on Russian activity. Reports are also confirming that the USS Harry Truman Strike Group, along with 7 warships, have been deployed to the Mediterranean. So there is a massive buildup. I've been told that both British and French naval warships are expected to join this armada with the Donald Cook that's being formed, that they'll be there in place within 12 hours. I have a source that reports that British forces at their base in Cyprus are mobilizing in preparation for these strikes against Syria. Massive mobilization going on, multinational. And earlier today, U.S. military officials, they said that all of the necessary assets, which are the ships, the warplanes, they're all in place, ready for an attack. They say that the missiles are armed and ready to strike Syria at any point. They're just waiting for the word from the president. Now, in response to this massive buildup, we've got Israel and its submarines. We've got the U.S. subs. We've got Russian subs out there. We've got the UK. We've got France. We've got all of these coalition forces. In response, we've got Russia, Syria, and Iran. Turkey's got some of its own stuff going on. I've watched flight reports of a lot of activity, a whole lot of Turkish Air Force bringing in high-level military leaders into Turkey for a conference to discuss what they're going to do. But in Syria, their airspace has been bustling with activity. President Bashar al-Assad has deployed anti-missile defense systems around the presidential palace, around the Ministry of Defense in Damascus. Some of the Syrian aircraft have been transferred to the Russian base at Khmeim. Partly because I guess they're less likely to get shot at if they're at the Russian base, is the hope. Well, Russia itself has Su-34 jets that are flying over the Latakia Sea. They are armed with anti-ship missiles that are going to be used to strike the U.S. naval fleet if necessary. Also from Russia, I've spoken with some of my military contacts in the Donbass region, which is what used to be eastern Ukraine. When the strike happens in Syria, I expect that the NATO-backed forces of Ukraine are going to launch a massive offensive against the Donbass region. Anyone who studies World War I, World War II, once you've got the one operation, in the fog of war, everybody launches theirs. So I expect that that Ukraine is going to launch an offensive against the Donbass region. One of my contacts said that he's expecting the electricity, the phone, the internet to be cut, that Donbass is going to go silent, except for the fighting, of course. For those that don't know, the Donbass was formerly part of Ukraine. But after the Soros-funded, CIA-backed coup in 2014, of which John McCain played a role, to overthrow the pro-Russian Ukrainian government, the citizens of Ukraine on the eastern side of the country, which it borders Russia, full of Russian-speaking people, a lot of them are ethnically Russian, they decided to not accept the Western-installed, unelected puppet government that was installed in Kiev. They have been fighting to retain their autonomy ever since. Because this region is on the border of Russia, we can expect to see major fighting escalate there. That's just in a chess game. If I was doing this, that is what I would do from the Western perspective. So I think that we're also going to see a buildup of, eventually here, a buildup of Russian military along the Russian border on that side. As it is, I'm already getting reports from contacts of intensified shelling in eastern Ukraine. There is artillery fire in Advika, also in northern Donetsk, and now in Mariupol, following attacks by Ukrainian fighters in the village of Mineral, which is north of Donetsk. The Russian-backed militias of which some of my contacts are in these militias, they have launched 35 attacks against the Ukrainian forces. I've got a lot of detailed reports on that fighting, but I'm not going to share that now. My viewers, this is absolute insanity. This is what I've been telling you about for the last year and a half, that we were building up toward this. It is not fear-mongering to say that this situation could very well turn into a hot war with Russia. Obviously, Donald Trump is playing a high-stakes game of chicken to see if Vladimir Putin is going to back down first. And all of this is based on a lie. Donald Trump is taking unjust military action that could potentially kick off World War III without any evidence of Assad's guilt. And he's doing it, worst of all, without congressional approval. And that is what our U.S. Constitution requires. Donald Trump is defying the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution clearly says that despite being commander-in-chief, except if the United States were to suddenly be attacked, yes, the U.S. president has the authority to take swift, decisive action to defend us. But Syria is not attacking us. We're talking about going to war because we think that maybe Bashar al-Assad killed some civilians with gas. We think that's the case, despite there being a very strong argument against it. The U.S. Constitution does not permit the United States president to unilaterally do that. The choice to go to war is meant to be a decision made by we the people, because we the people can discuss and debate instead of letting one lone person decide the fate of the country. And we collectively tell our representatives in Congress our feelings about war, and then if we have conveyed that there needs to be war, it is the job of the United States Congress to vote. The U.S. House of Representatives must vote and declare war. Only then would Donald Trump be justified legally to go strike another country. In absence of that, what he is doing is grossly immoral and illegal. Now, in anticipation of coming disruptions, if, for example, my sources in Donetsk, in the Donbass region, my sources elsewhere, I could be cut off from a lot of this, and I want to be able to get information out. So I am putting out a call for any of you in my viewing audience who have critical information about what's going on. I want you to email important developments to me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. Please, folks, I am overwhelmed with messages already. Don't send me just, oh, I saw this article, I saw this YouTube video. I want personally verifiable information. So, for example, if you are the spouse or relative of a soldier or sailor who's been deployed and you have some information that you think would be important, let me know. If you are a citizen in one of these countries involved in these events, or you have relatives or someone close to you, and you have specific information, news to share, let me know. I want good, solid intel, preferably from first-hand sources, but if you've got good intel from a second-hand source, send me that as well. That's jake@blackstoneintel.com. Thank you all for watching. Please share this video, and let's pray for peace. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.